You'll be able to tell your kids about how the US dollar was once the strongest currency in the world and you were there to watch it fall into ruin. You'll be able to explain to your kids that it was all self-inflicted, how arrogance, greed, and bullying led to the collapse. We'll get to that part of the story in a minute. But first, you'll also be able to tell your kids that you were there when they took away paper dollars and coins in favor of a US digital currency. And you'll be correct, because in fewer than 24 hours, the United States dollar changes forever. Tomorrow, the first week of April, the Federal Reserve begins the rollout of their new central bank digital US dollar. That's right. It's called the FedNow program, and it's going to replace your paper currency. Not overnight, but it's moving in that direction. And it will move the United States to a cashless society, a surveillance state where every transaction will be tracked and cataloged, where, as the Fed describes it, money that's in your account can even expire and become unusable. That's right, just like that Red Lobster gift card that you never used. One day you go and try to buy some popcorn shrimp and some Cheddar Bay biscuits, and the gift card doesn't even work anymore. Gone. You can read how the Fed plans to use the expiring money right on the Fed's website. China's already doing it. We already have a template for it. And many U.S. government museums, national parks, historical sites are no longer accepting paper dollars. Many of you have emailed me about this. You've tried to go and actually use dollars at different locations. Sorry, we don't accept cash. Want to go visit the Wright Brothers Museum? Don't bring cash. You'll have to use digital currency. Want to go to Smithsonian? Sorry, no cash. How about Mount Rainier National Park? Sorry, no cash allowed. We only accept digital. And many American businesses have already gone cashless as well. They'll pretend it's all about convenience, but really, you know, it's all about control. The brilliant Catherine Austin Fitts recently described what going cashless would do to all of us.
The reality, as the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate. It's hard for many people to imagine the risks here because we're so used to living with financial transaction freedom, and we don't understand that when this gate closes on us, we literally will be sitting in a system where the central banks believe that our assets belong to them, and they can dictate where we can spend money and what we can spend money on.
It's frightening, and she's 100% correct. But that's only part of the story, and perhaps that's the smallest part of the story, if you can believe that. Now to the elephant in the room and the larger reasons we're seeing the decline of the US dollar. But first, I decided to go sophisticated for today's video. I could have kept it super simple, but instead we need to talk about some specific details, and you are a very smart audience that will watch this video until the end. So we're going to go sophisticated today, okay? Let's do it. And for that, let me tell you a story. Let me start here. Back in 2014, the country of Russia annexed the territory of Crimea. We're not going to get into why they did it. You're a smart audience. You probably already know why they did it. But what we're going to do is look at what happened next. Now, the United States and Western allies had slapped massive sanctions on Russia. Then the value of the Russian ruble went down. But then something remarkable started to happen. And this is perhaps the beginning of the end of the US dollar. You can pinpoint the moment. Here's what happened. As the ruble started to decline, Russia was then forced to ramp up production of just about everything that they produce, from oil to lithium to silver to uranium, for nuclear fuel, natural gas. They kicked everything into high gear, became self-sufficient, became the dominant exporter of many of these minerals in every category. Want uranium for your nuclear reactors? You're probably going to be buying it from Russia. In fact, the United States currently buys almost all of its uranium from Russia. Isn't that funny? They did this because their ruble was going down. They needed to produce more oil in order to sell more oil to compensate for the lower prices that it was receiving in US dollars, while the United States was destroying its own manufacturing base under President Obama.
For those folks who've lost their job right now because a plant went down to Mexico, that isn't going to make you feel better.
Russia and China were doing the exact opposite. But all this oil production ended up putting enormous pressure on the global oil market, because now there was a lot of oil being produced. That led to lower prices in oil, and guess what? A decline in the demand for US dollars. They were making too much oil, and the petrodollar value plummeted. So US sanctions on Russia drove down oil prices, and therefore demand for US dollars. Then came the war in Ukraine, and even more ridiculous sanctions. This time, they threw everything they had, the kitchen sink, at Russia.
And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy.
The sanctions have crushed trade between Russia and the United States and its allies. This has further led to lower economic growth and a decline in the value of the US dollar. And the Fed forecasting negative GDP growth in the United States with a massive recession about to hit our shores. But in Russia, the opposite happened. The IMF is forecasting GDP growth in Russia, and the value of the Russian ruble has hit record highs. And then this week, the bomb dropped against the US dollar.
Describing their talks, Putin said, "We are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America." So, the world's second largest economy and its largest energy exporter are together actively trying to dent the dollar's dominance as the anchor of the international financial system.
The petrodollar system was established in the early 1970s when the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia to price oil in US dollars. This agreement made it necessary for other countries to hold large amounts of US dollars in order to purchase oil from OPEC countries, which then, of course, helped support the demand for the dollar. And it made the world's dominant currency. It let America browbeat the rest of the world. It let America go into massive debt because there would always be another country around to buy up the US debt.
The dollar is America's last surviving superpower. It gives Washington unrivaled economic and political muscle. It can slap sanctions on countries unilaterally, which frees that country out of large parts of the world economy. And Washington can spend freely, certain that its debt will be bought up by the rest of the world.
Well, that's all changing right before our eyes. The United States has been using its control over the dollar to weaponize its economic power, using sanctions and other measures to pressure other countries to comply with its foreign policy goals. The sanctions show just how desperate the United States is to try to replace dependence on Russia and China for all of our minerals and manufacturing. We are sitting on mountains of uranium, lithium, gold, oil, and yet we don't have the infrastructure to pull it out of the ground anymore. We only have one active lithium mine in the United States, and we're about to double the amount of electric cars driving on American roads. The Biden administration is throwing billions of dollars at companies to build charging stations, solar panel parking lots, you name it. Anything in the renewable space is getting massive billions of dollars in government grants. And that's because millions more EVs are coming out, but we'll have to rely on China and Russia to make it happen. It's crazy. Yesterday, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, admitted the truth about our reliance on China and Russia for minerals and resources. It was actually a pretty big admission moment for her.
We know this is an era where we rely on one single supplier, China. 98% of our rare earth supply, 93% of our magnesium, 97% of our lithium, just to name a few.
And literally on the same day that she made that statement, Ford Motor Company admitted that it's spending billions and teaming up with China to mine minerals for its electric cars. They're going to do this in Indonesia. Yeah, that's right. This is how bad it's gotten, that Ford is teaming up with China. Here's Ford yesterday talking about this.
Not just the mining, but the processing the materials. Actually, even if they're mined, let's say in the U.S. nickel, most of it is sent back to China to get processed.
So the U.S. is trying to move away from Russia and China and bring manufacturing back to the United States, trying to incentivize businesses to go green with billions of dollars in grants and tax cuts. If you're building a new condo complex in the United States, the government will pay you to install electric vehicle charging stations. Hotels, the same thing. So, of course, all of these businesses are taking free money and building these things for the tax breaks. They'd be stupid not to. The United States is facing the perfect storm for the U.S. dollar. China, Russia, Saudi Arabia ditching the U.S. dollar to settle oil transactions. On top of that, America has outsourced its manufacturing, its minerals production overseas. And the Federal Reserve moving to a digital version of the U.S. dollar that can be expanded and printed at any moment because it's not tied to any physical representation of money, no coins, no dollars. So I'm going to be watching this slow death of the dollar unfold right here on this channel. So that's the news update part of today's video. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor for today's video, which is tied directly to these government grants for electric vehicles in the United States. This is one of those companies, guys, that in my opinion is about to explode in value. This little company out of Canada is called Hypercharge. Now, they just raised millions of dollars.